Betrayal strikes in the dead of night as a young blonde-haired woman, Yulia, weeps on a cold floor surrounded by blood splatters and the mocking laughter of shadowy guards. Stranded in her dark prison, Yulia questions the cruelty of her tormentors, desperately recalling her past position as the prince's beloved. Cold bars separate Yulia from Crown Prince Randolph, who looks down on her in absolute silence while she desperately pleads her innocence. The guards aggressively demand a confession, claiming they already possess undeniable proof of her crimes while she trembles in sheer terror. Reaching out with a trembling hand, Yulia begs the prince for mercy, her eyes filled with desperate tears. Randolph stands unmoved, casting a frigid, merciless gaze upon his former lover through the iron bars. Turning his back on her pleas, the prince walks away into the darkness, sealing her fate. Yulia's hand drops in despair as the fading footsteps of her protector echo down the silent corridor. Left in absolute isolation, she laments her betrayal by the man who once held her close in happier times. Abandoned by her family and friends, she lies near her untouched prison rations, realizing no savior is coming. The heavy silence of the dungeon is shattered by the arrival of a guard standing menacingly before her. Two masked guards in red and blue uniforms order Yulia out of her cell, signaling the start of her final hour. Cold iron shackles are clamped tightly around her wrists as she stares in numb horror. Barefoot and broken, Yulia is escorted down the corridor, her spirit crushed by the impending doom. The scene shifts to the public square, where a masked official prepares to read her sentence before a towering guillotine. The official publicly accuses Yulia of attempting to poison Crown Prince Randolph, declaring her crime punishable by death. He further condemns her for seduction and treason, announcing her public execution to the roaring crowd below. High on the balcony, a red-haired woman clings triumphantly to Randolph's arm, hiding a malicious smirk behind her fan. Trapped in the wooden stocks, Yulia gasps in agony, realizing the trap she has fallen into. She looks up at the gleaming blade of the guillotine, knowing she was entirely framed by the wicked red-haired woman. Crying out Randolph's name one last time, she gazes desperately toward the cold couple on the balcony. Randolph watches with indifferent eyes as the heavy blade is released, racing down to end her life. A sudden, violent splash of crimson marks her sudden departure from the mortal world. In the void of death, a familiar voice calling her name pulls her back toward consciousness. Yulia opens her eyes to find her loyal maid, Emma, staring down at her with a look of pure relief. Looking at her maid's youthful face, Yulia wonders if this incredibly realistic vision is merely a dream. She gasps in shock as she holds up her tiny, delicate hands, realizing something is terribly wrong. Urgently demanding a mirror, she sends a confused Emmy scurrying to fetch one. The maid returns with a golden hand mirror, questioning if her young mistress is still half asleep. Staring at the golden-eyed child in the reflection, Yulia is struck by the reality that she has somehow regressed into her childhood self. She touches her throat in disbelief, certain she was just executed, yet completely alive in this younger body. The impossible truth settles in as she questions how she has traveled back in time. Dark, lingering visions of Randolph and the mocking guards threaten to overwhelm her fragile young mind. Traumatic memories of the red-haired woman's cruel victory loom over her, triggering a wave of pure terror. Clutching her head, Yulia screams in absolute panic, begging for someone to save her from the nightmare. Terrified by her mistress's sudden hysteria, Emmy rushes out of the room to summon help. Alone in her bed, Yulia trembles violently, desperately wishing that her horrific past life was just a lie. Hurried footsteps echo outside her bedroom door, signaling the arrival of concerned family members. A blonde-haired nobleman bursts into the room, desperately calling out to check if Yulia is safe. Terrified by those who abandoned her in her past life, Yulia fiercely demands that he stay away. She screams her hatred at her family for failing to save her before succumbing to the overwhelming stress and losing consciousness. Slowly, Yulia's eyes flutter open once more as the dark fog of her faint begins to lift. She recognizes an elderly man looking down at her, identifying him as Dr. Barron from her memories. The doctor gently places a hand on her forehead to assess her fever while Yulia silently confirms his identity. Utilizing magic, Dr. Barron examines her condition, noting that her internal magic power remains perfectly stable. Despite the stable diagnosis, the agonizing pain of her past life's execution floods back, making her want to disappear entirely. Yulia begins thrashing violently in bed again, shouting for the pain to stop while the doctor looks on in alarm. Sensing a dangerous magical rampage, Dr. Barron quickly prepares a calming spell in his hand. The soothing green light of the spell washes over Yulia's wide, terror-stricken eyes. Lulled into a peaceful slumber, the young girl finally rests under the watchful eye of the relieved doctor. The gray-haired doctor assesses the young blonde girl's mental state, noting her inexplicable trauma. Despite her tender age, her severe panic and endless crying remain completely baffling to those around her. Observing her closely, Dr. Barron senses an invisible, crushing weight suffocating her fragile young mind. Plunged into a temporary silence, the young girl rests quietly beneath her sheets as the room settles. In the dark recesses of her mind, she desperately wishes for her agonizing memories to fade away forever. Gripped by sheer terror, she clutches her head in the darkness, paralyzed by a crushing sense of fear. The overwhelming dread consumes her entirely, leaving her trapped in a silent, agonizing void. Her sudden thrashing in bed leaves her wealthy parents looking on in deep frustration and concern. Outraged by her relentless screaming, her father coldly banishes her to her room, leaving her in absolute despair. Devastated and alone, Yulia weeps bitterly as the cold reality of her family's rejection sinks in. As Dr. Baron returns to her bedside, the desperate young girl begs him to save her from her suffering. Sitting gently by her side, the compassionate doctor asks her to reveal the source of her immense pain. Trembling with tears, Yulia cries out that she is entirely alone and surrounded by enemies. The doctor softly encourages her to share her burden, promising that vocalizing her pain might bring relief. He gently reassures the fragile girl, swearing that whatever she shares will remain strictly between them. Looking into his kind eyes, Yulia realizes that this gentle doctor is someone she can truly trust. A tear rolls down her cheek as she prepares to make a monumental decision to change her fate. Taking charge, Yulia demands that everyone else step back to ensure their absolute privacy. Agreeing to her terms, Dr. Baron orders his assistant to leave, keeping only her loyal maid in the room. Looking at her orange-haired maid, Emma, Yulia painfully recalls how the loyal servant died protecting her in her past life. She remembers the heartbreaking scene of Emma screaming her innocence while being brutally dragged away by guards. Harnessing her innate magical power, the young girl suddenly manifests a glowing sheet of parchment. With unwavering resolve, Yulia presents the glowing document to the doctor and demands his signature. Dr. Baron stares in absolute shock at the glowing caper, unable to comprehend what she has just created. He quickly realizes that the 3-year-old child has somehow drawn up a highly advanced magic contract. The room falls silent as the doctor processes the impossible magical feat unfolding right before his eyes. Yulia explains the strict secrecy terms of the contract, leaving the experienced doctor utterly speechless. He watches her in stunned disbelief, realizing this child possesses knowledge far beyond her years. As Dr. Baron asks for the truth, Yulia is haunted by the dark memory of her execution at age 19. The heavy, suffocating silence of her traumatic past hangs thick in the air between them. Terrifying memories of her previous demise fled back, causing her to shake violently in her bed. Hearing her incredible tale, the doctor realizes her story is far too complex to be a mere childhood fabrication. Captivated by her golden eyes, Dr. Baron makes the monumental decision to believe her impossible story. Yulia desperately explains that she must escape the capital before she is forced into her tragic engagement again. The horrific vision of her execution on the bloody scaffold flashes before her eyes, driving her to panic. Hysterical with fear, she clutches her head and frantically begs the doctor to rescue her from her impending doom. To save her mind, Dr. Baron proposes using a special magic to suppress her traumatic memories. He warns that leaving the capital to escape her triggers will require diagnosing her with a mental illness. Desperate for freedom, Yulia eagerly agrees, begging to leave the royal capital as quickly as possible. Turning to the loyal maid Ame, Dr. Baron explains that they will need her full cooperation for the plan. He reveals the name of the spell, introducing the perilous and rare dream vision magic. Yulia gasps in realization as the name of the powerful memory-sealing magic echoes in her mind. The dark reality of the magic reveals that those who yield to death in their dreams will perish in reality. It conjures a beautiful, deceptive illusion of her holding hands with the prince in a peaceful field. The doctor warns that she must be constantly spoken to or she risks slipping away forever. He looks sternly at Emmy, demanding to know if she is truly prepared to be the girl's anchor. Without a moment of hesitation, Em resolutely pledges her absolute loyalty to stay by her mistress's side. Touched by her unwavering devotion, young Yulia looks at her precious maid with wide, grateful eyes. Satisfied by their determination, Dr. Baron sighs and prepares to initiate the dangerous memory suppression spell. Under the cover of their new plan, a horse carriage departs down the road, carrying Yulia away to safety. Trapped in a web of betrayal, Yulia realizes her only hope is to flee her toxic family before it's too late. A warm, gentle hand carefully pulls up the white covers over her small body. Dr. Baron assures the loyal, orange-haired maid Eme that the parents believe Yulia is simply asleep. Overwhelmed with emotion, the crying maid Eme passionately vows to stand by Yulia's side forever. Lying in bed, the young blonde girl realizes that M's devotion is her greatest source of strength. Casting a glowing magical crest, Dr. Baron prepares to launch the high-stakes dream vision magic. Suddenly, Yulia opens her eyes and finds herself standing barefoot in a vibrant, endless green meadow. The atmospheric transition suggests a chaotic noise echoing, yet it brings her a sense of relief. Golden-eyed Yulia turned her head as a sudden shift in the dream world catches her attention. A mysterious white cat wearing a green bow appears floating in a blinding sphere of light. Shading her eyes, the young blonde girl gazes up as brilliant rays of light pour from the sky. A grand proclamation echoes through the brilliant blue sky, welcoming her to the dream room. Basking in the divine warmth, Yulia watches the glowing light intensity build around her. The floating white cat guide reveals it is a manifestation of her own deep subconscious. The quirky white cat guide playfully introduces itself as her personal instructor for this trial. Standing in the open field, Yulia questions her new guide about the ultimate objective of this dream. Panic sets in as Yulia protests her lack of weapons to fight the impending monsters. The young girl admits she has only ever "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." The white cat's friendly facade slips, revealing a terrifying grin full of sharp fangs. The creepy feline guide coldly declares that failing to fight means she will simply die. Flying away, the guide warns her to use every ounce of magic because crying won't save her. A cute squishy blue slime suddenly materializes on the grass with a soft bouncing sound. The guide taunts her from the sky as a blue slime slowly approaches the defenseless girl. Recalling her school lessons, Yulia channels her magical circle and successfully pops the blue slime. Surrounded by blooming white flowers, the young blonde girl celebrates her very first small victory. To her surprise, Yulia notices that controlling her inner magic feels significantly easier in this dream. Floating above, the cat guide casually alerts her that another wave of monsters is arriving. Summoning another swift magic spell, Yulia effortlessly splits the incoming blue slimes apart. She breathes a sigh of relief, glad she is only facing basic slimes instead of terrifying beasts. The guide explains that the dream builds monsters from her memories, meaning stronger beasts are coming soon. Well, nothing says character building like a surprise dragon attack to ruin your afternoon. A blue slime suddenly rams into Yulia's face, proving that pain in this dream is very real. The white cat guide delivers a grim ultimatum. Dying in this dream means dying in reality. Leaving the panicked girl behind, the guide zips away into the bright blue sky. Dark horned rabbits with glowing red eyes emerge from the grass and surround the helpless girl. Determined to survive, Yulia quickly conjures a glowing green magic barrier to block the horned beasts. Gasping for breath, a heavily bruised Yulia struggles as more and more monsters close in on her. Amidst her exhaustion, she suddenly hears a warm, gentle voice of support echoing in her mind. Reinvigorated by the mysterious voice, Yulia unleashes a massive, blinding magical shield that blasts the monsters back. Panting on the grassy field, she successfully heals her wounds with a soothing green magic spell. The trial escalates dramatically as a massive army of savage orcs and goblins appears on the horizon. Time passes in a blur as a slightly older Yulia courageously fights off terrifying skeleton warriors. Using her magic, she disarms a charging skeleton and telekinetically steals its steel sword. The blonde girl firmly grips the hilt of the stolen sword, ready to face the next wave. Standing victoriously over a pile of defeated foes, she realizes she has grown accustomed to stealing weapons. The endless battles force her to recall the traumatic memory of being framed and executed. With cold fury in her eyes, Yulia executes a flawless sword slash, resolved to change her fate. The cat guide suddenly reappears, warmly acknowledging that she has finally grown incredibly strong. Floating nearby, the cat guide reveals the dream is ending, promising her new combat experience is permanent. Beaming with newfound confidence, a battle-hardened Yulia proudly declares she is ready to face her future. Breaking free from her endless dream realm, Yulia takes her final steps toward reality. Her bare feet touch the solid ground as the dream world dissolves completely. Blinding rays of natural light force her to shield her sensitive eyes. As the golden haze fades, her physical surroundings slowly drift into focus. Waking up in her own bed, the young girl gazes around in silent disbelief. Spotting her beloved maid, Yulia softly offers a peaceful morning greeting that completely paralyzes Emmy. Overwhelmed with explosive relief, the weeping maid wraps her mistress in a desperate hug. Embracing her crying servant, Yulia vows to alter the course of her dark future. Watching nearby, the relieved doctor quietly celebrates the success of their risky plan. Far away in the Grand Palace, Prince Randolph stands entirely isolated from the world. The young prince looks out the massive window, his face clouded in deep sorrow. Back in the bedroom, Yulia playfully teasing her maid brings a spark of warmth. She expresses profound gratitude to Emma for constantly keeping her anchored during her slumber. Their shared tears transform into a heartwarming embrace, sealing their eternal, unbreakable bond. Suddenly, the heavy door crashes open as a startled young man bursts inside. Observing their immediate closeness, Yulia raises a curious eyebrow at the frantic newcomer. Emmy quickly introduces Graham, explaining his dual role as their chef and protective guard. Displaying the flawless grace of high nobility, Yulia formally thanks him for his service. Her incredibly refined aura leaves the simple guard completely awestruck and deeply humbled. Before the elegance can last, a loud growl echoes comically from her empty stomach. Blushing with sheepish embarrassment, the hungry young noble politely requests a hearty meal. Driven by pure devotion, both servants instantly scramble away in a chaotic cooking frenzy. Seizing the quiet moment, Yulia demands a detailed report of everything she missed. A beautiful sunset marks the passage of 3 whole years spent in deep slumber. Realizing she is physically only 6, Yulia prepares to step out of bed. Her fragile legs buckle immediately, sending her crashing down to the soft carpet. Bedridden for years, her undeveloped muscles simply refuse to cooperate with her commands. Channeling her energy, she is thrilled to discover her internal magic is vastly multiplied. A confident, knowing smile graces her face despite her current physical limitations. MA reveals her parents are still completely oblivious, kept quiet by monthly status reports. When she asks about her family's replies, her maid's silent posture confirms the worst. Neglected and forgotten, she realizes her parents have replaced her with younger brothers. Despite their cold abandonment, she remembers her little brothers with pure, protective affection. Letting out a tired sigh, she resolves to navigate this complicated new dynamic. She recognizes that her fragile reputation is actually a perfect shield against high society. Being deemed too weak for noble duties will successfully lower her political marriage value. Closing the door on her past, she plans her ultimate escape from royalty. Watching from the window, Emma silently swears to protect her mistress's fragile peace. Clenching her fist tightly, the young girl takes solace in having plenty of time. She acknowledges that rebuilding her physical strength is her most urgent immediate objective. Pushing past intense exhaustion, she repeatedly practices standing and walking despite painful falls. Bathed in golden sunlight, Yulia courageously takes her first steps out of isolation. A bustling, vibrant town square with a beautiful flowing fountain stretches out before her. Running joyfully through the streets, her sudden recovery sparks amazed gossip among the townspeople. She remembers the suffocating, lonely prison of her past life as a demure noble. Now skipping happily, she rejoices in her complete freedom from the burdens of inheritance. Peeking into the room, she boldly proposes going on a magic beast hunt. Her wild, combat-ready suggestion sends her shocked caretakers into a comical state of panic. Yielding to her joyful spirit, they prepare for a thrilling new adventure together. Carrying fresh provisions, Yulia and Graham march forward into their bright, self-determined future. Just when Yulia tastes true freedom, destiny threatens to drag her back into the lion's den. Savoring her quiet life in town, she embraces a joyful new family bond as their protective older sister. Savoring every fleeting moment of this peaceful life, she wishes it would never end. Her peaceful days shatter when an official letter orders her return to the royal capital. To protect her future, she must return to the high-stakes world where the young prince awaits. Determined to survive, she vows to avoid becoming the prince's fiancé at all costs. A quiet, tense transition marks the final moments of her peaceful countryside refuge. Meanwhile, in the palace, a blonde-haired man checks on a somber Prince Randolph, who briefly confirms he is fine. The blonde-haired man expresses his deep gratitude to the prince before his imminent dismissal. He warns Prince Randolph that the queen will soon attempt to force a fiancé upon him. Gripping his seat, the prince asks if his advisor truly intends to banish the incompetent fools. The prince coldly confirms his decision to eliminate any dead weight for their collective survival. The advisor commends the prince's perfect magic device, urging him to keep it close at all times. Standing tall, Prince Randolph resolutely accepts his fate and prepares for the trials ahead. The inevitable departure arrives as Yulia prepares to leave her beloved town for the capital. Facing unemployment, her loyal caretakers silently prepare to follow her into the unknown. Graham eagerly suggests selling their latest hunting spoils to secure their future. By pooling their wages and guild rewards, they secure a financial cushion for their upcoming move. They collect their well-earned guild rewards, ensuring they won't struggle once they leave. MA joyfully celebrates their newfound financial freedom, while Yulia reflects on their rewarding adventures together. Though her dream combat experience is real, hunting beasts in reality proves far more challenging. Missing a swift rabbit, Yulia quickly realizes real-world combat physics are drastically different. The starkest difference between her dreams and reality lies in her choice of weapons. Graham advises her to use a weapon suited for her growing physical body. She diligently trains with a training dummy, realizing stamina is the true key to survival. Collapsing onto the grass, her physical limitations remind her of the long road ahead. Together, the trio continues hunting monsters, building their teamwork and combat instincts. Planning for life after the mansion, they decide to open a cozy inn in the capital. Emma reveals that Dr. Barron has already secured a perfect location for their new business, reminding Yulia of his invitation for a checkup. She promises to remain by Yulia's side until she officially enters the academy. Despite their solid plans, Emma expresses deep concern for Yulia's safety at the academy. Yulia confidently reassures her worried maid, declaring that she has grown incredibly strong. Radiating pure joy and determination, she flashes a bright, reassuring smile. A bittersweet loneliness lingers in the air as the departure day finally arrives. Waving goodbye, she offers her heartfelt thanks to her loyal companions as her carriage departs. The carriage wheels turn, carrying her away from her peaceful sanctuary. Looking back wistfully, she fondly remembers the wonderful memories they forged together. Arriving at the grand estate, she acknowledges her return to the noble world. The butler welcomes her back and informs her that her father awaits in a study. Guided by memory, she instinctively begins walking toward her father's study. The butler questions how she remembers the layout, causing Yulia to realize she slipped up. She panics internally, remembering she left this house at the tender age of 3. Quickly making a clumsy excuse, she nervously stands before her father's study door as the butler knocks. An authoritative command from within permits him to enter the room. Hearing her father's voice for the first time in 10 years, she prepares herself. Greeting her father, she is immediately informed of her mandatory enrollment at the academy. Her father coldly tells her she will be staying in the academy dormitories rather than the mansion. Recognizing his superficial concern, she accepts the dormitory placement but prepares to state her conditions. Gathering her courage, she prepares to make a bold declaration to her father. Explaining her lack of formal education, she argues that a political marriage would only ruin the family's reputation. To escape her father's political schemes, Yulia boldly proposes becoming a powerful mage. Seeing profit in her magic, her cold father agrees to hire a tutor. He sternly warns her not to shame the family, and she obediently curtsies. Under a bleak night sky, a maid coldly escorts Yulia to her new quarters. Cast aside in a guest room, she realizes how truly estranged her family is. She scoffs at her family's assumption that her countryside life left her illiterate. Expecting complete isolation, she is surprised to be summoned for a family dinner. An oppressive, suffocating tension hangs over the dining table as they ignore her. Her spoiled younger brother suddenly breaks the icy silence to mock her past life. Standing proud, her 4 years younger brother Jonas waits condescendingly for her answer. Jonas immediately scorned her description of the countryside, calling it utterly boring and inconvenient. When she mentions working the fields, Jonas is repulsed, prompting their father to intervene. Flashing a sharp smile, Yulia warns that a leader despising his people ruins his legacy. Infuriated by her sharp rebuke, Jonas slams the table and mocks her supposed illiteracy. Their father sternly silences Jonas, taking responsibility for sending her away. Turning his cold authority on Yulia, her father orders her to remain silent too. Reflecting on how easily high society corrupted her brothers, dinner ends in chilling silence. The very next morning, an elegant young man with a massive magic tome arrives. The handsome visitor introduces himself as Giannino Sisteridi, sent by Dr. Baron. Yulia is stunned, recognizing him as the legendary future head court mage. Realizing his prestige, she marvels at Dr. Baron's incredible hidden influence. Determined to alter her fate, she asks the master for a critical favor. She confidently requests to skip general subjects entirely and focus solely on magic. Asking him to keep her hidden intellect a secret, she avoids standing out. If her father learns the truth, she will be forced into a tragic royal engagement. She wistfully recalls meeting young Prince Randolph at a palace tea party. The handsome prince possessed a gentle smile that easily captivated every noble lady. Like all the others, her younger self had fallen completely under his spell. Surprisingly, the prince began distancing himself from everyone else to stay by her side. In a beautiful moment, the sweet prince formally asked her to be his fiancée. Overwhelmed with sheer happiness, she had burst into a sudden fit of tears. Her sudden emotional breakdown had left the young prince completely panicked and confused. She lets out a soft sigh over this nostalgic, bittersweet memory of her past. In this altered timeline, however, the prince has not chosen any fiancé yet. She realizes she might be the only person carrying memories of the original timeline. A sudden wave of determination hits her as she refocuses on her current goal. Knowing this timeline is already shifting, she resolves to keep her guard up. Amused by her confidence, Giannino challenges her to score perfectly on a surprise test. Smiling confidently, her pen flies across the page as she crushes the basic questions. Within minutes, she triumphantly presents the completed paper to her astonished tutor. Reviewing her flawless answers, Giannino is deeply impressed by her effortless academic skill. Eager to find her limits, he immediately hands her a more advanced exam. She immediately recognizes the new test as first-year academy-level questions. The relentless testing continues as Giannino repeatedly hands her increasingly difficult exams. Giannino is left sweating in absolute shock as she easily clears third-year materials. Yulia quietly celebrates her secret victory, relieved she hasn't grown too rusty. Staring at the flawless papers, he finds her hidden genius to be absolutely fascinating. He deduces Dr. Baron chose him specifically because Baron knew her true magical potential. Recognizing her incredible talent, Giannino vows to teach her magic with everything he has. Seizing his full support, she requests to begin her training in the palace's magic wing. Stepping into the lion's den, Yulia steels her resolve to brave the royal palace despite her deep-seated fears. Although the terrifying risk of crossing paths with the prince looms over her, the chance to train in the legendary palace magic wing makes the danger worth braving. Commencing her daily training, she studies relentlessly under Master Giannino, only to discover his shocking status as the head of the court mages. A frustrating gap in her past life memories leaves Yulia unable to recall who was originally supposed to be the head court mage. Keeping a vigilant eye on her surroundings, she stealthily navigates the palace corridors to avoid any unwanted attention. She lets out a sigh of relief upon confirming that the dreaded prince is nowhere to be seen today. Bowing respectfully, Yulia expresses her profound gratitude to Giannino as their tutoring sessions come to an end. Though her future path remains uncertain, she remains open to one day joining the prestigious ranks of the court mages. Flattered by her dedication, Giannino warmly commends Yulia, praising her as the most talented student he has ever taught. A gentle, proud smile spreads across the master's face, deeply moved by his exceptional student's potential. Brimming with newfound confidence, Yulia clutches her books and prepared to take on her next academic challenge. Riding high on her tutor's high praise, Yulia's joyful walk is cut short when she suddenly collides with an unseen figure, sending her crashing to the floor. Sprawled on the ground, a wave of pure terror washes over Yulia as she instantly recognizes the voice of the person she just bumped into. The orange-haired boy, Mark Carney, quickly apologizes, but a calm voice interceding from above makes Yulia's heart stop in absolute dread. A gentle hand reaches down to help her up, accompanied by an inquiry about her well-being that leaves her completely frozen. Looking up, her worst nightmare is confirmed as she stares directly into the mesmerizing blue eyes of the young prince. Despite his current gentle appearance, the haunting memory of the cold, ruthless prince from her original timeline flashes vividly before her eyes. Trembling with fear, Yulia quickly recoils her hand and reassures him that she is perfectly fine, desperately wanting to escape his presence. Quickly retrieving her books, she keeps her head down as voices echo around the busy palace hallway. Offering a swift, tense curtsy, she mutters an excuse and hurries away, leaving the puzzled prince staring after her. Left utterly bewildered by her abrupt departure, Mark questions her strange behavior while the prince quietly watches her flee. Spotting her distress, her loyal maid Emme rushes over to check for injuries, while back in the hallway, the prince downplays the bizarre encounter. Watching her disappear into the distance, the prince muses that the mysterious blonde girl must have simply been in a rush. The scene shifts as the rumbling wheels of a carriage signal another major transition in her high-stakes journey. Safe inside the carriage, a trembling Yulia is comforted by Emme, who is deeply worried by her lady's sudden, extreme panic. As the carriage rattles on, the fog obscuring her past life memory slowly begins to clear, revealing key fragments of the truth. Forcing a reassuring smile, Yulia insists to her worried maid that she has finally managed to calm her racing heart. Emme apologizes for her overprotectiveness, while Yulia continues to reassure her that she is fully recovered from the shock. Clutching her magic book tightly, she reflects on the haunting similarities to a painful memory from her childhood. Squeezing Yulia's hands, Am fiercely vows to stand by her side through whatever trials await her at the upcoming academy. The fateful day finally arrives as Yulia prepares to officially move into the highly anticipated academy dormitories. Bidding farewell to her cold parents, Yulia politely thanks them for the tutor, only to receive stern warnings not to tarnish the family name. Despite spending 6 months back in her family home, the emotional rift between Yulia and her cold relatives remains completely unbridgeable. The realization of her family's complete emotional detachment leaves a lingering ache in her chest as she moves forward. Boarding the carriage, she laments that academy rules forbid her from bringing her loyal maid to live in her single dormitory room. With a bittersweet smile, she realizes that today marks the end of their daily time spent together. Emme flashes a mischievous, confident smile, hinting that their separation might not be as permanent as Yulia thinks. Seated inside the carriage, Emme playfully holds up 3 fingers, radiating an energetic and mysterious confidence. Yulia's eyes light up with pure excitement as she eagerly promises to visit Emme's new location at the very first opportunity. Chibi Emme giggles warmly, reassuring her beloved lady that she will always be welcome at her new establishment. The carriage finally rolls to a halt, marking their arrival at the Grand Academy dormitory. Standing before the towering, gilded gates, the majestic academy grounds loom ahead, representing a fresh start. Stepping inside her new dormitory quarters, Yulia is pleasantly surprised to find the room far cozier and more elegant than she anticipated. Since most wealthy noble students prefer to commute from luxury townhouses, very few actually choose to reside in the dorms. She wryly suspects that her father only approved of this dormitory arrangement to maintain the family's public image. Preparing to depart, Emme waves a warm goodbye, leaving Yulia alone to face her new academic life. Waving back with a bright, cheerful smile, her spirits are lifted by the comforting knowledge that she can reunite with her companions on the weekends. Pumping her fists with fiery determination, Yulia vows to give this new chapter everything she has. Elsewhere on the academy grounds, an elegant tea party table is lavishly adorned with a selection of delicious pastries and cakes. Gathering for a high-stakes tea party, the influential Clara Brunst poses a serious question to the assembly of high-ranking noble girls. At a high-stakes tea party, the opening move of a political rivalry begins as 2 prominent noble candidates are introduced, the blonde marquise's daughter Colleen Jane and the dark-haired count's daughter Amelia Heisen. These lovely ladies are the prime candidates secretly considered by the queen to become the future fiancé of the exceptionally handsome Prince Randolph. Enjoying the exquisite gathering, the red-haired lady Clara Brunst inquisitively asks about the origin of the fine tea being served today. Smiling warmly, the purple-haired noblewoman proudly reveals that the tea was specially imported just for this monumental social gathering. Expressing her delight at their growing friendship, Clara surprises the attendees by presenting each of them with beautifully packaged gifts. Opening her velvet box, the purple-haired lady gasps in awe at a stunning butterfly necklace shimmering inside. Amelia is absolutely enchanted by the breathtaking jewelry, prompting Clara to express her deep satisfaction with their joy. Behind her fan, Clara's eyes gleam coldly as she notes the jewelry is enchanted with crucial detoxification magic, hinting at the dangers ahead. Colleen highly commends Lady Clara's meticulous preparation and thorough foresight for their upcoming academy days. Raising her lace fan, Clara casually instructs her guests to consult their maids later on how to operate the magical items. Inspired by Clara's generosity, the other girls eagerly present their own carefully selected tokens of friendship to one another. Although they are fierce rivals vying for the prince's hand, the purple-haired lady hopes they can maintain a peaceful bond. Beneath their sweet smiles and pleasant wishes of friendship, a thick, thorns-choked atmosphere of silent rivalry and political scheming takes root. Meanwhile, a dark and ominous storm brews on the horizon as the pivotal moment of destiny rapidly approaches. The fateful morning finally dawns, bathed in brilliant sunlight, as the Grand Academy entrance ceremony officially commences. Stepping onto the bustling academy grounds, Yulia keeps her head low, heavily shrouded in a dark, gold-trimmed magic robe. Blending in perfectly with the eccentric students of the magic department, she moves through the crowd entirely unnoticed. Entering the colossal assembly hall, Yulia slips past the bustling rows and quietly takes a seat at the very back. Aware of the rigorous academic tiering, she recalls her past life in S-class and resolves to avoid the prince at all costs. Knowing her impressive exam scores secured her a lower-class placement, she smugly anticipates her cold family's absolute shock. The chatter dies down as a distinguished speaker steps to the podium to introduce the freshman representative. Instantly, high-pitched squeals erupt from the crowd of noble girls as the silver-haired prince makes his grand entrance. "I understand your request. Please provide the text you would like me to read back faster." While the surrounding girls swoon over his dreaminess, a dark shadow of sheer dread washes over a trembling Yulia. Standing tall at the grand podium, the prince delivers a flawless, inspiring congratulatory address to the freshman class. Clinging to her dark hood, Yulia is haunted by the cold, ruthless glare the prince possessed in her tragic first life. As the applause roars and the prince steps down, Yulia gasps in horror as his gaze drifts toward the back rows. In a terrifying, heart-stopping instant, she realizes their eyes have locked across the crowded assembly hall. Following the intense ceremony, the massive student body begins dispersing to their respective specialized academic courses. Resting her chin on her hand, Yulia takes comfort in knowing her A-class placement separates her from the elite S-class. Surveying her classroom, she notes her highly unique status as the sole magic student in a class dominated by other majors. The instructor concludes the basic orientation, and Yulia happily celebrates surviving her very first day without incident. She reflects on how normal noble girls have spent their childhoods building complex social networks at elite tea parties. Having lived in isolation in her remote territory, Yulia's lack of social ties makes her an outsider among her peers. As her classmates keep their distance, she sits radiating a gloomy, unapproachable aura that makes a nearby boy sweat with unease. Watching the other noble girls walk by in cheerful pairs, she accepts her self-imposed isolation as a necessary sacrifice. Cheering herself up, she resolves to simply visit her loyal companions on the weekends if she ever gets too lowly. With her spirits lifted, she eagerly joins the flow of students heading toward the Academy's grand dining hall. She is absolutely mesmerized by the majestic dining hall and the surprisingly lavish, high-quality meals prepared for the students. Sitting alone, she happily hums while cutting into her perfectly cooked steak, savoring every delicious bite. She recalls her grueling past training where she was reduced to stuffing dry bread down her throat inside a cramped carriage. Her peaceful lunch is abruptly shattered when the silver-haired prince and his companions suddenly approach her table with trays. Cold sweat pours down her face as she panics, desperately wondering why they chose her table when other seats are empty. Before she can devise an escape, the boys casually seat themselves, trapping her in a highly tense dining arrangement. The silver-haired prince offers a warm, dazzling smile as he settles into the unexpected meal. Striking up a conversation, the prince politely asks if she is the same girl his companion Mark bumped into previously. Under her dark hood, Yulia's mind races in sheer panic, wondering how on earth he recognized her. Forcing a polite smile, she meekly confirms his suspicion and softly apologizes for the chaotic hallway encounter. The prince presses on, curiously asking about her class and if her magic robe means she aspires to be a court mage. As the dark-haired boy watches silently, Yulia screams internally for help, desperately wishing to escape the prince's persistent interrogation. Trapped at a table with the royal heir, Yolan stands up to defend a highly uncomfortable Yulia from the prince's intense pressure. Trying to diffuse the heavy tension, the prince politely attempts to apologize for their chaotic encounter the other day. Prince Randolph admits his lingering curiosity about her mysterious presence at the royal palace. Finally connecting the dots, Mark enthusiastically apologizes to Yulia for colliding with her in the hallway. Mark's curiosity peaks as he questions why she was at the palace in the first place. Shrouded in her dark hood, Yulia explains her magic instructor resides there, keeping her answers brief. Eager to escape the intense scrutiny, Yulia politely excuses herself from the table. Seizing her tray, Yulia makes a hasty exit, resolving to hide in her room to avoid any further royal encounters. As her hooded figure retreats, Yolande curiously asks Prince Randolph if he has taken an interest in her. Under the close watch of his companions, they tease the prince about his potential crush on the mysterious girl. Mark happily digs into his lunch while waiting for his royal friend's honest response. Prince Randolph gazes out with a calm smile, admitting he is indeed a little curious about her. Taking a slow sip of his tea, the prince warmly thanks Yolande for the interesting conversation. Yolande watches silently, contemplating the intriguing connection forming between the prince and the mysterious mage. A beautiful new day dawns, officially marking the start of classes for the Academy's first-year students. The students gather in the morning to tackle the core subjects shared across all departments. While other departments engage in rigorous training and active clubs, the magic department relies solely on independent study. With a satisfying click, Yulia shuts her massive textbook, having easily finished her independent assignment. Resting her chin on her hand, Yulia sighs in utter boredom over the dull academic schedule. Realizing she has nothing else to occupy her time, she decides to take matters into her own hands. With a sudden burst of pure excitement, she resolves to visit Emma and the others at their new inn. Arriving in the bustling town, Yulia spots Emma and calls out to her, sparking an instant joyful reunion. Located near the guild and Dr. Barron's clinic, Emma's inn thrives with a steady stream of eager customers. Yulia's mouth waters as she is presented with a massive, mouth-watering roast prepared by their talented chef. Giggling happily, Chibi Emma assures her lady that the local children have been a massive help around the establishment. Looking around the warm dining room, Yulia is delighted to see kids happily assisting with the daily chores. Spurred by the news, Yulia decides to head next door to check on her old mentor, Dr. Barron. She steps out of the busy inn, feeling that today is the absolute perfect day for a surprise visit. As Yulia walks away, Emma calls out to remind her beloved lady to return later for a delicious dinner together. "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Waving back with a brilliant happy smile, Yulia promises to return before the sun sets. Arriving at her destination, Yulia stands before Dr. Barron's clinic and gently knocks on the door. The door creaks open to reveal Dr. Barron, who peeks out curiously at his unexpected visitor. Pulling back her hood, Yulia introduces herself with a bright, beaming smile. Trembling with pure shock, Dr. Barron stares in disbelief at the young girl he thought he might never see again. Overwhelmed with profound emotion, the elderly doctor pulls Yulia into a tight, incredibly tearful hug. Hugging him back tightly, Yulia warmly credits his past care for helping her step into a bright new future at the academy. Explaining her sudden visit, Yulia volunteers to lend a hand at the clinic after hearing they're short-staffed. When the doctor asks if she can handle the sight of blood, Yulia confidently assures him of her past field experience. Dr. Barron listens in absolute amazement as she details her participation in wild magic beast hunts. To his great relief, Yulia reveals she can also perform basic healing magic, making her the perfect volunteer. A dark crisis looms as a giant magic beast ravages the capital's outskirts, flooding the clinic with wounded citizens. Stepping past the threshold, Yulia freezes as a heavy, suffocating wave of despair hits her. The clinic is completely overrun with severely injured people groaning in agony across rows of crowded cots. With bloodied patients filling every corner, the sheer gravity of the crisis demands immediate life-saving action. Steeling her resolve amidst the harrowing scene, Yulia asks the doctor if she should begin administering aid right away. Instructed to consult the assistant, Yulia quickly changes into a medical uniform and unleashes a brilliant wave of healing magic. Although legendary saints possess the divine power to regenerate lost limbs, ordinary physicians must rely on physical reattachment. Activating her magic, she focuses on the delicate, exhausting task of reattaching severed limbs to save her patients. Despite the massive drain on her mana, Yulia pours everything she has into stabilizing the critical wounds of the suffering citizens. Exhausted but relentless, Yulia pushes her magic to the absolute limit as endless waves of bloodied patients flood the clinic. Sweating with anxiety, she desperately wonders what kind of terrifying legendary monster could have caused such devastating carnage. Realizing her extreme fatigue, the grateful doctor steps in to relieve her as the chaotic crisis finally begins to settle down. Showing no signs of slowing down, a beaming Yulia eagerly volunteers to return the next day to help the short-staffed clinic. The doctor solemnly explains that the beasts are still rampant, meaning they will desperately need her powerful healing assistance again. She readily agrees to return straight after academy classes, eager to keep her promise of dinner with Emmy's family tonight. Blushing, she gently requests the doctor treat her as a simple medical assistant rather than address her with formal noble titles. With a radiant, heartfelt smile, she cheerfully accepts his guidance as they establish their warm professional bond. Walking through the bustling inn, she happily spots the very adventurers she saved earlier recovering in the dining hall. Though still looking weak and pale, she feels a profound sense of relief seeing them finally able to enjoy a hot meal. Exhausted from her grueling shift, Yulia joyfully calls out to Emma, declaring her absolute starvation as a warm welcome awaits. Despite her new life at the academy, she finds pure comfort in hugging the children and sharing a humble meal with those she loves. The simple dining table is far from noble luxury, but the laughter and warmth of her companions make it priceless. She realizes that this lively, loving atmosphere is the true source of her happiness, far away from cold, noble expectations. Giggling, she shares lighthearted moments at the table, completely shedding her usual gloomy facade. Over the next several days, she balances intense morning studies at the academy with exhausting afternoon healing shifts at the clinic. As she continues to push herself, she quietly ponders the true limits of her current magical capabilities. A new chapter of her life unfolds as time moves forward, bringing unexpected revelations about her destiny. Her daily routine becomes a blur of academic diligence and clinical work, with the doctor closely monitoring her progress. The doctor carefully tests her magical output, investigating the miraculous side effects of her dream vision spell. Staring at the shocking data, he admits her unique case is endlessly fascinating as her magical strength continues to skyrocket. A week later, a massive crowd gathers around the town square to read a crucial public announcement. Staring at the board, she is stunned by how long the grueling monster subjugation actually took to complete. She reads that packs of exceptionally strong reptilian lizardmen had invaded the capital, requiring a massive force to wipe out. Watching the chaos unfold, she confidently knows she possesses the overwhelming magical power to blast those beasts away single-handedly. With the crisis finally resolved, the doctor reassures her she can rest, but she insists on continuing her weekly practice. Determined to grow stronger independently, she contemplates her future career path as a powerful magic user after graduation. She weighs her options, torn between the dangerous freedom of an adventurer and the high status of a court mage. Dark memories resurface as she dreads how her greedy family will inevitably try to exploit her noble status again. Overwhelmed by a sudden heavy sense of unease, she quickly makes her way back to the quiet sanctuary of the clinic. Her grim mood instantly brightens as she walks alongside Lise, her cheerful new green-haired friend from the academy. Sitting together on a checkered picnic blanket, she learns that Lise is a merchant's daughter studying civil service. The two girls quickly become inseparable, spending all their free time together laughing and enjoying their school life. To avoid any terrifying run-ins with the silver-haired prince, she carefully staggers her lunch times to eat in peace. When Lise asks if she will join any academy clubs, Yulia politely declines, citing her incredibly busy afternoon schedule. In reality, her main priority is minimizing any possible contact with the royal heir and his prominent companions. Shifting the focus, she curiously asks Lise if she has any plans to join any student organizations. Lise reveals that the elite student council is persistently recruiting her to handle their highly complex accounts. Yulia gasps in utter shock, amazed that the student council would scout Lise over any elite S-class candidate. She knows that the council is a legendary elite circle, traditionally reserved only for the top-ranking S-class students. Getting in is incredibly difficult, especially now that the silver-haired prince and his powerful allies run the entire council. Lise is deeply confused by the sudden offer, wondering why they would choose a regular A-class student like her. A dark shadow falls over Yulia's face as she senses a potentially dangerous motive behind the prince's sudden interest in her friend. After bidding Lise a warm farewell, Yulia quickly heads back down the street toward the doctor's clinic. She bursts through the door, eagerly calling out to the doctor for some urgent, much-needed advice. Stepping into the quiet office, she explains she needs his wisdom on a major life decision. The kind doctor looks up warmly, ready to listen to whatever is troubling his beloved young assistant. She confesses her deep internal struggle over whether to become a court mage or a traveling adventurer. While a court position offers stability, she shudders at the thought of being constantly near the silver-haired prince. Although a nomadic adventurer's life sounds liberating, her noble status stands as a major obstacle, leaving her trapped in uncertainty. Dr. Barron thoughtfully strokes his chin, admitting that her future career dilemma is a highly complex problem. He warns her that casting aside her nobility to become a commoner would mean losing vital legal protections and risking political exploitation. To ease her worries, the kind doctor suggests gaining some valuable experience as an adventurer while still a student. Yulia gasps in wide-eyed realization as this brilliant, flexible compromise suddenly clicks in her mind. She enthusiastically agrees with his wise advice, realizing she has nothing to lose by trying it. To herself, she resolves to give the guild jobs a fair shot before making any permanent life choices. Bursting through the clinic door with boundless energy, she declares they must prepare for her first quest immediately. Arriving back at the inn, she enthusiastically points to a massive, intimidating deer skull mounted on the wall. To the absolute delight and amusement of the children, she happily dons the creepy skull as a makeshift mask. The next day, she shares a warm, cheerful farewell with her classmate Lise outside the school dormitory. Stepping inside the quiet dorm room, she prepares to transform into her secret, unidentifiable adventurer identity. Shrouded in a heavy, dark hooded cloak, she confidently declares that she is ready to depart. Standing before a gold-framed mirror, she carefully adjusts the eerie deer skull mask to hide her face completely. Walking into the bustling Adventurers Guild, she nervously reviews the ranks, noting her current status. Approaching the quest board, she decides to start small by selecting a simple rabbit hunting mission. She steps up to the counter and confidently registers the quest, disguised beneath her ominous skull mask. Out in the dense forest, she effortlessly slashes through the beasts and happily collects her first cash reward. Clutching her gold pouch, she marvels at how incredibly simple and easy the entire quest turned out to be. Overjoyed by her successful debut, she sprints back toward the safety of the inn to share the news. Her excitement is instantly cut short when Emmy strictly demands she remove the creepy skull mask immediately. To safely return to the academy dorms, she snaps her fingers and activates a stealthy concealment spell. As she slips away, she notes that while the spell hides her, it is highly impractical for groups. She concludes that wearing a physical mask in the guild is a much safer way to protect her identity. A demanding new routine begins, balancing morning academy classes, afternoon guild quests, and occasional clinic volunteering shifts. Sometime later, Lise approaches her in the academy hallway with a deeply worried and troubled expression. Feeling a sudden spike of anxiety, Yulia sits with Lise and gently asks what is bothering her. Yulia's heart beats wildly as she watches Lise, dreading what terrifying news her friend might share. Relieved it is only exam stress, Yulia warmly suggests they study together at the library until the test. Lisa's face instantly lights up with immense joy and pure relief at her friend's generous offer. She excitedly praises Yulia, calling her the absolute best and most dependable friend she could ask for. The two girls settle at a quiet library table, diving into their textbooks for a productive review session. Impressed by Yulia's vast knowledge, Lise insists she is smart enough to belong in the elite S class. Lise then confides that she ultimately turned down the student council's offer to avoid jealous noble ladies. Yulia silently agrees, knowing all too well how dangerous it is when hostile nobles target commoners. Their quiet study session is suddenly interrupted by Yolan Jinimer, a highly prominent nobleman's son from S-class. Lise politely greets the elite student, proudly explaining that Yulia has been helping her study. Yolanda looks over with sudden curiosity, causing a wave of pure dread to wash over an anxious Yulia. Yulia nervously asks if he is studying, but Yolanda explains he is only gathering student council materials. She eagerly points out other students searching for him, but he ignores them to focus entirely on Lise. Yulia recalls Yolande's notorious reputation as a cold, unromantic elite, whose curt attitude only makes girls adore him more. Fearing the wrath of jealous noble girls, Yulia desperately looks for any way to escape this dangerous situation. Yolande smugly suggests that as an S-class student, he is far better suited to tutor Lise. He coldly asks Yulia if she is struggling, but she quickly pastes on a smile and declines. Seizing the perfect chance to escape, Yulia stands up and announces she will leave them to study alone. She swiftly flees the library, silently apologizing for using her poor friend Lise as a protective human shield. Sometime later, a completely drained, hollow-eyed Lise approaches Yulia, looking utterly exhausted and spent. Lise tearfully explains that Yolanda stayed by her side and forced her into daily library study sessions. Desperate and crying, Lise begs Yulia to join their study group to save her from the torment. Smiling sweatily, Yulia politely refuses, claiming her incredibly busy schedule makes it impossible to attend. Lise hysterically cries out, highly suspecting that Yolanda is just using her as bait to lure Yulia in. Standing together outside, the blonde-haired girl reassures her green-haired friend that her fateful meeting with the Lord wasn't actually romantic. A brief, peaceful transition marks the quiet passing of time. Back in her dormitory, the blonde-haired girl notes that the upcoming exams leave her with a completely open schedule. Determined to make the most of her free time, she decides to study magic independently. She sends message spells to Giannino with her questions and is astonished by his incredibly fast replies. In the grand exam hall, the blonde-haired girl deliberately prepares to hold back her true magical intellect. She intentionally leaves questions blank and writes incorrect answers to avoid ranking anywhere near the top 20. After the test, the green-haired girl excitedly celebrates her success while the blonde-haired girl plays down her own performance. With the exams finally over, the young noblewoman enthusiastically welcomes the arrival of a long school vacation. Exhausted from her busy routine, she joyfully collapses under a comfortable dormitory bed. Across the kingdom, young noble ladies eagerly host elegant tea parties during the peak of the social season. Though she is spared from normal parties due to her lack of noble connections, she dreads the mandatory royal family gathering. Meanwhile, the dark blue-haired lord gathers with his S-class peers to discuss their current duties. As a close aide to Prince Randolph, the dark blue-haired lord reflects on his prestigious position alongside the royal heir. He recalls how he, Mark, and Randolph grew up together before preparing for their respective future paths. Upon entering the academy, two highly skilled new aides, Adelan and Downey, join their elite circle. Back in the present, the silver-haired prince walks confidently through the academy halls, surrounded by his competent allies. The dark blue-haired lord notes that despite his heavy responsibilities, the prince always maintains a gentle and polite demeanor. In his early childhood, the silver-haired prince charmingly socialized with young noble ladies at frequent tea parties. But everything changed when the young prince suddenly stopped interacting with the noble girls altogether. He began spacing out frequently during his lessons, raising deep concern among his close childhood friends. His friends watched in silent worry as the silver-haired prince stared blankly into the distance with vacant blue eyes. At just 7 years old, the young prince shocked the court by refusing to choose a fiancé candidate. Fortunately, the birth of a second prince quietly eased the immense political pressure on the young heir. Despite his distant behavior, the prince remained exceptionally sharp, often appearing far more mature than his peers. Growing impatient with his lack of interest, the queen began secretly grooming prominent noble girls as potential fiancés. As they all entered the S-Class Academy, the fierce battle for the prince's heart officially began. While the young ladies appear friendly in public, they secretly engage in cutthroat competition to win the prince's favor. To escape the overwhelming drama, the prince's aides practically hide out inside the student council room. In a fleeting moment, the silver-haired prince catches a glimpse of a mysterious blonde girl passing by. Intrigued by the girl, the prince asks his loyal aides to investigate her mysterious background. He discovers her identity is Yulia Osborne, a highly secretive and elusive earl's daughter. The dark blue-haired lord receives the gathered intelligence from a butler and carefully reviews the documents. He is shocked to read that Yulia supposedly lived in seclusion due to childhood illness, leaving her past completely shrouded in mystery. He discovers that Yulia studied under the legendary head court mage, explaining her incredibly refined manners. The dark blue-haired lord discusses the baffling investigation report with his companions, noting Yulia's endless mysteries. The red-haired youth slyly suggests recruiting her close friend Lise into the student council to gather information. The rest of the council members at the table instantly agree with this clever strategic approach. A mischievous grin spreads across the red-haired boy's face as their plan is set into motion. The silver-haired prince silently nods, approving the recruitment plan to uncover the blonde girl's secrets. The dark blue-haired lord volunteers to personally approach the target and secure her cooperation. Finding the green-haired girl in the garden, he politely extends an invitation for her to join the student council as treasurer. Feeling deeply hesitant, she cautiously asks for more time to consider the prestigious offer. Later, the green-haired girl nervously arrives at the student council room, visibly trembling with anxiety. Seated at the head of the table, the silver-haired prince gently asks if she is ready to accept the position. To their complete surprise, the green-haired girl bows deeply and tearfully apologizes for declining the offer. She explains that as a mere commoner, she is strictly forbidden from associating with the royal heir. The silver-haired prince looks up in genuine concern, wondering if someone has threatened her behind their backs. She tearfully reveals that the aggressive fiancé candidates warned her to stay away from the prince to protect her family. Realizing the intense political danger his classmates pose to innocent commoners, the dark blue-haired lord clutches his head in frustration. Dejected by the sudden turn of events, Yolande suggests they step back for now, and Lise quietly slips away. Back in the royal chambers, Mark laments that a certain group of 4 successfully blocked their attempt to meet with Yulia. Prince Randolph closes his eyes in silent resignation, processing the disappointing news. Emerging into the grand hallway, the prince begrudgingly accepts that they have no other choice. Discussing alternative routes, the two companions realize that reaching Yulia is nearly impossible with her avoiding the cafeteria and the prince being constantly surrounded. Watching his prince being smothered by eager noble socialites, Yolande desperately brainstorms a way to bypass the blockade. He flashes back to a quiet library afternoon where he spotted Yulia and Lise chatting warmly. Observing how Yulia was casually reading advanced magic books instead of studying, Yolande's sharp mind hatched a clever scheme. A brilliant idea struck him to volunteer as their study tutor to get closer to Yulia. However, the moment he attempted to forcefully join them, the elusive girl instantly vanished in a blur, leaving him thoroughly outmatched. Continuing his tutoring sessions with Lise instead, Yolande strategically inquires about where the two girls eat their lunch. Lise happily reveals that Yulia is secretly popular but intentionally avoids standing out due to her mysterious circumstances. She further admits that Yulia immediately disappears to an unknown location right after their daily classes end. This intriguing revelation only deepens Yolanda's curiosity about the mysterious girl's hidden life. The scene shifts to the bustling academy grounds as excited students gather to check their exam results. Wrapped in her signature dark hooded cloak, Yulia accompanies a nervous Lise toward the crowded bulletin board. Lise is absolutely ecstatic to discover her name ranked highly at 6th place, earning Yulia's warm congratulations. Scanning down the list, Yulia discovers she placed exactly 30th, while Lise gasps in disbelief. Internally, the golden-haired girl is absolutely thrilled to have secured the perfect average rank to avoid any unwanted spotlight. Relaxing on their picnic blanket, Yulia casually brushes off Lise's high praise by claiming she barely studied. As they discuss future aspirations, Yulia admits she is still undecided, secretly imagining a free life traveling as an independent mage.
Suddenly, an oppressive presence looms behind them, causing a shiver of pure terror to run down Yulia's spine. Prince Randolph, Mark, and Yolande approach their picnic spot, prompting a formal and respectful greeting from Lise.
The silver-haired prince politely congratulates Lise on her outstanding performance, while Yulia internally fumes over the massive class divide. Turning his brilliant blue gaze directly onto Yulia, the prince commends her for securing the 30th rank. Feeling a sudden, chilling intensity in his gaze, Yulia politely thanks him while hiding her growing anxiety. She watches the royal trio warily, internally screaming as she wonders what they could possibly want from her. Putting on her best polite facade, Yulia asks the young royals what brings them to their quiet courtyard. Randolph explains they are desperately seeking a peaceful spot to escape the relentless crowd of pursuing noble ladies. When the prince charmingly asks to join their picnic, Lise immediately agrees, leaving Yulia utterly horrified. Settling onto the blanket, Mark grumbles about the aggressive court politics, while Lise notes that the girls are simply desperate for their futures. The atmosphere turns tense as Yolande suddenly shifts the conversation's focus directly onto Yulia's future plans. Clutching her sandwich, Yulia freezes as she realizes she is being carefully tested by the prince's sharp companion. She cautiously shares her dream of traveling freely from country to country as an independent mage, catching the prince's full attention. Leaning in with a gentle smile, Yolande asks if she has ever considered a much grander path. A dark shadow falls over Yulia's face as she senses the trap closing in. Her gaze drops to the floor, her heart racing as she prepares for the impending question. Yolande bluntly asks if she has considered putting herself forward as a candidate to become Prince Randolph's fiancé. Deflecting with practiced ease, Yulia points out that her family's low rank and her sickly childhood make her completely unqualified. She laughs it off as a silly notion, declaring that no one would ever want a flawed bride like her. The boys are left completely stunned as she firmly declares her sole desire is to live life entirely on her own terms. Her bold declaration instantly triggers a painful wave of memories from her previous timeline. She remembers how their childhood engagement had originally blossomed from a sweet, promising conversation at a royal tea party. They had shared tender, innocent promises of a bright future together. Despite their hectic schedules, they had always carved out quiet moments to share tea and blush like nervous lovers. She had genuinely believed that their bond was unbreakable and that they deeply cared for one another. But everything shattered the moment they entered the academy, as Randolph completely cast her aside for the red-haired Lady Vera. Angered by the memory of his past betrayal, Yulia quietly crushes her sandwich in a sudden surge of silent, bitter rage. Shoving the rest of her food into her mouth to end the agonizing lunch, she abruptly announces their immediate departure. Leaving the stunned prince behind, Yulia coldly tells them they are welcome to keep the courtyard before swiftly making her escape. A sudden, staggering question breaks the serene garden silence as the silver-haired prince looks up in pure disbelief, uttering the name of the girl who occupies his every thought. Tension hangs heavily in the air as the prince stands frozen, processing the profound mystery surrounding his quiet classmate. Stepping forward, the silver-haired prince politely asks the hooded blonde girl if she has plans after their unexpected encounter. Making a swift excuse, the blonde girl politely declines his company and departs from the garden alongside her green-haired friend. The prince watches her retreating figure with a look of quiet longing, left alone with his unanswered questions. Slipping away to a private corner, the blonde girl shifts out of her school attire to prepare for her secret daily routine. Arriving at her medical clinic volunteer shift, she eagerly asks the head doctor if she has made noticeable progress in her healing magic. The doctor warmly praises her, confirming her skills have grown tremendously since her first day. While he advises her to refine her precise magical control, he highly encourages her to consider a future path as a professional healer. Overjoyed by his high praise, she celebrates her progress with adorable excitement. The doctor reflects on how much more confident and positive she has become, while she silently credits those who supported her. When asked about her upcoming holiday plans, she admits she must return home briefly to satisfy her parents' expectations. She hopes to return to the dorms quickly, a plan the doctor agrees is safest depending on her father's whims. Despite her close allies' warnings about returning to the family estate alone, she knows she must face her familial duties. Steeling her resolve, she bids farewell to the doctor and steps back out into the bustling city streets. Back in her quarters, she reluctantly sends a letter to her father, only for a magical response to arrive shortly after. The magically sealed letter bursts open before her eyes, radiating an ominous glow. Unfolding the parchment, she reads her father's cold words expressing surprise at her academy academic performance. Her father orders her to bypass the family estate and head straight to the royal palace's mandatory tea party instead. Despite the demanding nature of the sudden summons, she remains completely unbothered by her father's distant attitude. Celebrating her sudden freedom from visiting her cold family home, she immediately writes to her trusted allies. She excitedly informs them that her schedule is completely open to volunteer and help out at the clinic. The vacation also grants her the perfect chance to take on high-ranking guild quests far outside the city limits. With a bright smile, she prepares her next moves, determined to make the most of her newfound freedom. However, the impending threat of the royal social gathering still looms heavily over her thoughts.
As the vacation officially begins, the academy courtyard fills with carriages transporting students back home. When her green-haired friend asks about her plans, the blonde girl confirms she will remain at the quiet dormitories to study. Watching the crowds disperse, she prepares to embrace the absolute peace of an empty school. Her quiet afternoon is suddenly interrupted by a knock at her door as the family maids arrive to prepare her dress. The head maid presents several custom design sketches commissioned specifically for the upcoming palace event. As they measure her for the new attire, they present a variety of elegant fashion options for her to choose from. Looking at the sketches, her heart suddenly stops as she recognizes a familiar gown from her past life. Tragic memories flood her mind of past social humiliations and harsh words from the prince during past events. She remembers how her spiteful rival Clara once bribed a servant to shred her beautiful gown before a ball. Shuddering at the sheer volume of trauma attached to these dresses, she tries to shake off the painful memories. She quickly selects the most modest and unassuming designs to avoid drawing any unwanted attention at the upcoming party. Her goal is to blend entirely into the background, avoiding any potential conflict with the prince or the hostile noble ladies. The head maid expresses concern over her plain choices, but she insists that keeping a low profile is her best defense. With the fittings complete, she prepares to return to the estate only on the night before the stressful event. Throwing herself onto her comfortable bed, she celebrates that her hard-earned vacation has finally arrived. She nestles into her soft pillows, ready to fully enjoy her well-deserved peace and quiet. The next morning, she happily arrives at the clinic to begin her busy volunteer shifts under her commoner alias. She reflects on her complex double life, operating as a clinic healer named Yuna and a male hunter named Ujoel. Her clinic shift takes a chaotic turn when a passionate patient suddenly begs her for her hand in marriage. Quickly redirecting his focus, she wraps up his treatment and warns him to stop getting injured so easily. She completes her daily rounds, stops by the cozy inn to catch up with friends, and heads home safely. For the next 3 days, she shifts her focus entirely to her secret guild operations. Previously constrained by class schedules, her open vacation calendar now allows her to pursue much bigger quests. Approaching the request board, she selects a highly dangerous hunt that will take up her entire day. Fired up for a true battle, she prepares her gear to face the ultimate wilderness challenge, completely unaware of the looming dangers ahead. Seeking the ultimate challenge to push her magical limits, the masked hunter accepts a high-stakes subjugation quest to track down a devastating beast terrorizing the countryside. Confronting her massive target in the dense woods, she faces a gargantuan demon boar and realizes exactly why the guild placed such a massive bounty on its head. The monstrous beast charges with terrifying speed, but the agile hunter remains entirely unfazed, immediately conjuring a brilliant defensive magic circle. Leaping high into the sky, she unleashes a crushing vertical strike from her glowing magic circle directly onto the rampaging beast. Landing with flawless poise, she effortlessly executes a devastating finishing blow to secure her victory. Standing over the massive fallen carcass, she celebrates her immense solo strength and the ease with which she took down a high-ranking magic beast. Inspecting her prize, she realizes that brute force isn't enough, as she must preserve the hide to maximize her payout. She analyzes the beast's quality, realizing that to truly optimize her earnings, she must learn to defeat monsters with surgical precision. Determined to master her craft, she returns to the bustling guild hall to search for deeper lore on her monstrous targets. She buries herself in research, opening a comprehensive guide detailing every crucial monster weakness and trait. She carefully studies the specific harvesting rules for various beasts, committing every detail to memory to secure maximum bonuses. Absorbing the valuable information, she formulates a brilliant plan to optimize her future hunting strategies. Suddenly, looking out the window, she gasps as she realizes she has completely lost track of time. Panicking as night falls, she sprints through the snowy streets to make it back before curfew. Slipping back inside, she is immediately scolded by MA for staying out so late, prompting a sheepish apology about her guild research. Despite the harsh lecture, she beams with genuine happiness, deeply appreciating the warm concern of her close friend. Emmy continues to nag her about her reckless behavior, completely baffled by her carefree attitude. Safe and warm, she spends a cozy night at Emma's house, helping with dinner and enjoying the rare feeling of a loving family. Over the next 2 days, she dominates the wild, easily capturing multiple high-value targets with her unmatched magic. Her efforts pay off spectacularly as she collects a massive stack of gold coins at the guild counter, celebrating her financial freedom. Stacking her hard-earned coins, she prepares to continue saving every single piece for her ultimate escape. But her peaceful vacation is instantly shattered when a sudden letter arrives, reminding her of the impending royal tea party she completely forgot about. Overwhelmed by dread, she collapses onto her desk, mourning the abrupt end of her perfect freedom. Stealing her resolve, she quickly drafts a final message to her trusted allies before facing her cold reality. She sends off a magical message to Emma, promising to return to the dorms the moment her grueling family duties are complete. Arriving at her family's grand estate, she is formally welcomed back by the head butler with polite but distant respect. Stepping into her bedchamber, she is struck by the cold, sterile room that holds absolutely none of her personal belongings. Looking at the empty furniture, she is bitterly reminded of her status as an outcast in her own home. She quietly questions what a real family is supposed to feel like, steeling her heart against their emotional neglect. Her quiet contemplation is cut short as the family maids immediately begin preparing her bath and enforcing strict etiquette lessons. Staring at her own reflection in her teacup, she prepares herself to play the role of the perfect silent noble daughter. Under the watchful eye of the head maid, she displays flawless poise and elegance during her stressful training session. She smiles quietly, knowing her perfect aristocratic manners are actually a direct result of her close friend's constant support. Her peaceful moment is abruptly ruined when two arrogant young noble boys arrive to mock her simple lifestyle. The boys laugh gleefully, insulting her and assuming she has suffered terribly living like a commoner. Refusing to tolerate their insolence, she casts a swift, silencing spell that instantly seals their mouths shut. She calmly mocks their complete incompetence when they failed to break her basic magic spell. A stern voice cuts through the tension as her father orders her to release them from the binding spell. The stern patriarch approaches alongside his wife, demanding that the boys apologize to Yulia immediately. With a simple snap of her fingers, she releases the spell, leaving the terrified boys gasping for air. As the boys glare in anger, their father sternly reminds them that Yulia is their elder sister and must be respected. She mentally sighs at the hollow display of sibling respect, entirely unmoved by their sudden shift in attitude. Standing tall, she coldly rejects their insincere apologies, refusing to play along with their fake family dynamics. She calmly informs her father that she will attend the royal tea party in the designated dress. Her father coldly accepts, warning her not to bring any embarrassment to the family name at the high-stakes palace event. She glances at her silent mother, who watches the interaction with a completely blank, unreadable expression. Despite the brewing family tension, her mother remains completely silent, offering no warmth or comfort. Meanwhile, in another noble estate, a sudden violent cough echoes through a quiet dining room. The purple-haired Clara coughs weakly as her father urges her to prioritize her health and rest. Clara desperately insists she must attend the crucial palace tea party, but her father strictly forbids it, leaving her dreams of meeting the prince in jeopardy. Behind closed doors, a sinister plot unfolds as a young purple-haired noble is ordered to prepare another week's worth of a mysterious working medicine. Time passes silently as the high-stakes royal gathering draws near. Radiating pure grace, Yulia steps out wearing a stunning, modest blue and white gown. As she departs for the palace, Yulia notices her maids are remarkably well prepared. The grand imperial invitation brings together all the young elite nobles of their generation. Recognizing the tea party as a battleground to select the future fiancé, Yulia strategizes on how to protect her family's reputation. Driven by her personal pride, Yulia resolves to behave flawlessly to avoid any disgraceful scenes, despite her lack of care for her family's status. Discovering that seats are unassigned to encourage mingling, Yulia happily decides to position herself as far away from the royal spotlight as possible. Arriving at the imperial palace, Yulia is formally welcomed by a uniformed royal guard escorting her from the carriage. She is escorted through the grand, sunlit palace colonnade overlooking a spectacular garden courtyard. Stepping into the courtyard, Yulia stops dead in her tracks as she recognizes the garden. Horrifying memories of her past imprisonment and torment flood her mind, leaving her paralyzed with sheer trauma. Clenching her dress, she struggles to breathe as a severe panic attack threatens to break her composure. Resisting the urge to fake an illness to escape, Yulia forces herself to take another step forward to protect her dignity. Elegant white roses decorate the tables closest to the crown prince's designated seat. High-ranking S-class nobles of ducal status are already filling up the prestigious seats near the center. Guests chat cheerfully, enjoying the elegant and lively atmosphere of the gathering. Noble ladies mingle, exchanging pleasantries and warm smiles to build social alliances. The grand courtyard is fully alive as the elegant tea party begins. Yulia sits at the far end of the tables, deliberately choosing a modest spot normally reserved for lower-ranking barons. Nearby guests happily indulge in the exquisite selection of sweets while chatting. Sitting quietly alone, Yulia maintains her perfect, poised, noble demeanor. Eyeing the delicious array of chocolates and pastries, Yulia decides to make the most of the feast. Her peaceful isolation is suddenly broken when an unexpected guest asks to sit right next to her. Lord Yolande, one of the crown prince's key attendants, politely asks to join Yulia, prompting her to question his absence from the prince's side. Yolanda reassures Yulia that the prince has plenty of other attendants, making his presence there perfectly fine. Yolande cheerfully shrugs off his duties, leaving Yulia with no choice but to awkwardly accept his company. The sun shines brightly over the palace towers as the main event commences. Tension builds across the courtyard as attention shifts toward the grand palace steps. Yolande smoothly takes his seat right beside Yulia, completely ignoring her desire for solitude. Yulia silently fumes in disbelief, realizing she never actually invited him to sit down. Accepting her defeat, Yulia decides there is no point in trying to kick him out now. Scanning the crowd, Yulia notices one of the prominent fiancé candidates is missing and wonders what happened. Yolanda explains that Lady Clara fell ill with a sudden fever, leaving her nervous younger sister to attend in her place. Clara's younger sister stands huddled among the elite candidates, visibly trembling with pure stage fright. Intrigued, Yolande asks Yulia why she is such a rare sight at these glamorous palace balls. Yulia bluntly responds that she is officially excused from any social event that isn't absolutely mandatory. Refusing to drop the subject, Yolande curiously presses her for the real reason behind her isolation. With a subtle, polite smile, Yulia acts surprised that he is unaware of her delicate situation. When Yolande asks for the truth behind the rumors, Yulia masks her irritation with a fake laugh, claiming she avoids crowds to prevent collapsing. Yolande quietly nods, seemingly accepting her simple explanation at face value. Yolande asks about her health, and Yulia cheerfully lies that her sudden fainting spells are becoming far less frequent. Feeling annoyed by his persistent prying, Yulia resolves to keep her composure and let his rudeness slide. White doves flutter across the bright courtyard as the royal tea party officially commences. Feathers gently drift down as a quiet hush falls over the entire imperial crowd. The crowd rises to bow in deep respect as the crown prince finally makes his entrance. Standing atop the stairs, the handsome crown prince formally welcomes his young guests to the palace. The prince graciously invites everyone to mingle, relax, and fully enjoy the afternoon's festivities. Fresh tea is poured into elegant cups as servants begin serving the spectacular feast. Unable to resist the rare, delicious sweets, Yulia happily digs into the chocolate eclairs, completely forgetting her stress. A delicious bite of chocolate instantly sweeps away all of Yulia's high-stakes anxiety. Living as a commoner meant luxury desserts were a distant memory, rarely found in her harsh daily routines. Her only sugary rewards came as humble gifts from the grateful patients she selflessly healed. Yolande playfully notes her immense love for sweets, snapping her out of her peaceful culinary trance. Shocked, she internally panics as she remembers her uninvited companion is watching her every bite. When Yolande inquires about her living in the academy dorms, she politely confirms her simple lifestyle. Their conversation is interrupted as high-ranking noble ladies swarm the table, eager to shower Yolande with praise. As the circle of aristocratic admirers grows, Yulia feels the suffocating pressure of unwanted high society attention. Yolande playfully suggests moving away for privacy, leaving Yulia desperately searching for a quiet exit. Thrilled by the distraction, Yulia slips away to enjoy her delicious treats and observe the social battlefield from afar. Across the courtyard, the elite circles tightly gather around the handsome crown prince to curry royal favor, while the lower nobles find comfort in their own quiet groups. A fully satisfied Yulia prepares to relax. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rips through the sky, instantly shattering the peaceful afternoon. Panic erupts in the courtyard as guests collapse, and even the prince looks on in absolute horror. A violent rift of dark energy tears through the majestic garden, dividing the terrified crowd. Amidst the fleeing nobles, Yulia turns back to assess the sudden catastrophic threat. Monstrous red-eyed beasts begin leaping from dark portals, invading the sacred palace grounds. Shocked by the sudden invasion, Yulia watches as royal guards instantly spring into defensive action. Utter chaos takes over as terrified nobles scramble for safety while the prince protects the fallen. Paralyzed with fear, the young noble ladies scream as the monstrous threat closes in on them. Ferocious beasts pour endlessly from the dark rifts, turning the elegant tea party into a chaotic war zone. With danger mounting, Yulia prepares to act as the guards draw their weapons for a desperate stand. Though she has survived countless dangerous situations, Yulia has never witnessed an ambush of this terrifying scale. Yolande scans the frantic crowd in a panic, desperate to find Yulia's whereabouts. Spotting Yulia walking calmly through the panic, Yolande is stunned by her utter lack of fear. Demonic red-eyed rabbits leap into the fray, adding to the overwhelming onslaught. The brave red-haired knight slashes through the beasts, desperately carving a path of escape for the survivors. Realizing they are completely surrounded, Yulia conjures a massive protective barrier while trying to contact her master. Giannino is shocked as Yulia confirms that hordes of monsters are emerging from portals across the palace. Giannino commands her to hold the line until he arrives, and Yulia steals her resolve to protect everyone. With a swift flick of her fingers, Yulia prepares to unleash her true unmatched magical prowess. Stepping right onto a table, Yulia unleashes a massive glowing golden barrier to protect the entire courtyard. Yolande and the knights watch in absolute disbelief as a massive wave of golden mana envelops the garden. The prince stares in awe, his eyes reflecting the brilliant light of the mysterious girl saving his people. The impenetrable golden dome holds strong, safely shielding the terrified guests from the raging beast horde. Yulia fiercely commands the panicked crowd to remain strictly inside her protective shield. Though standing on a table violates noble etiquette, Yulia prioritizes lives over polite manners. Realizing the Academy's mock battles never prepared these pampered nobles for real warfare, Yulia takes complete charge. Pampered magic students fail to defend themselves, completely overwhelmed by the brutal onslaught. Yolande rushes to her side in shock, amazed that her first large-scale barrier succeeded flawlessly. Yulia commands Yolande to stay behind and guard the ladies while she leaps into action. Leaping gracefully into the chaotic fray, Yulia prepares to dismantle the enemy's portals. Scanning the battlefield, Yulia realizes the palace guards will suffer massive casualties without immediate backup. Stealing her focus, Yulia channels her raw magic to sever the enemy summon circles. Giannino and his elite mages finally arrive, quickly rallying to Yulia's side. Giannino instantly commands his mages, unleashing a devastating elemental counteroffensive upon the beasts. Giannino suggests they combine their power to destroy the summoning circles once and for all. Together, they focus their intense mana, targeting the core of the dark portals. Giannino is left absolutely speechless as Yulia displays a staggering level of raw magical power. As the dust settles, Yulia faces a dark reality. How did someone bypass the palace's ultimate defense barriers? Her overwhelming power instantly seals the dimensional rift, leaving everyone utterly speechless. While the master praises her talent, he warns she is unleashing too much mana. Yulia realizes she must control her massive output to avoid causing collateral damage. He praises her growth under Dr. Baron, but Yulia quickly begs him to drop the subject. The master directs the knights to handle external beasts while they secure the interior. Yulia panics, realizing she accidentally trapped the dangerous beast inside her golden shield. Yolande checks on the prince while the master examines a nearly lifeless noble lady. Yulia demands answers as they discover a sinister red magical emblem burning on her back. Yulia questions the master, who explains the young ladies were used as tools to summon the monsters. The master sternly warns her against destroying the magic circles. He explains that using her brute force magic on these marks will kill the victims. The master notes that only elite palace mages can dispel this curse. Yulia feels utterly powerless as she watches her master carefully dismantle the spell alow. The title screen marks a crucial transition as the high-stakes rescue unfolds. The tense atmosphere lingers as they work to save the unconscious victims. Yolande asks the prince if something is wrong while the spell continues. The prince and Yulia identify the spell as ancient script, which Yulia recognizes from her past life. Yulia decides against risking her untried skills under such life-or-death pressure. Having successfully dispelled the first curse, the master calls for the second victim. The master instructs Yulia to cast healing magic while he tackles the remaining spell. Together, master and apprentice channel their magic to heal the afflicted young ladies. Yulia realizes the girl's entire magic was drained to summon the beasts. Yulia begins to piece together the dark mechanics of the enemy's plot. Realizing her master also noticed, Yulia holds her tongue to prevent widespread panic. She focuses entirely on pouring gentle healing magic into the exhausted victim. Once the girls are stabilized, the master advises the prince to lower the barrier. The massive golden dome shatters, signaling the end of the immediate siege. Terrified noble ladies scream at the sight of the bloody, defeated monsters. The ruined courtyard is a shocking wake-up call for the sheltered nobility. Yolande notices a subtle change in the prince as they survey the aftermath. The prince stares at Yulia, completely captivated by her beauty and heroic actions.
A red-haired lady watches the scene with a mixture of shock and awe.
Yolande checks on the prince while the master and Yulia quietly observe. Suspicious eyes follow the unconscious girls as they are carried away for treatment. The master quickly pulls Yulia away, suggesting they retreat to his private quarters. Prince Randolph watches in silence as the mysterious duo departs from the courtyard. The tense afternoon leaves a lingering weight on the shoulders of the royalty. The chaotic event draws to a close, leaving many unanswered questions behind. Safe inside his quarters, Yulia confesses how much his actions surprised her. The master quietly reaches for a small plate of mysterious healing herbs. Noting her exhaustion, the master offers Yulia a handful of restorative leaves. He kindly tells her to sit down and chew on the magic-restoring plants. He explains that the Joro leaves will quickly replenish her heavily drained mana. Yulia immediately regrets her decision as the bitter taste completely overwhelms her. Despite the horrible flavor, she feels her mana instantly beginning to recharge. The master laughs, amused that she foolishly ate 3 leaves at once. Yulia angrily snaps at him for not warning her about the bitter taste. Yulia learns that mages routinely eat these leaves like normal sweet candy. The warm tea provides a brief comfort after a thoroughly disastrous afternoon. With the palace security completely compromised, a massive investigation is officially launched. Just when the kingdom thinks the crisis is over, a shocking revelation turns a quiet tea time into a complete game-changer. Master Giannino calmly sips his tea as he brings up the mysterious magic circles left on the victims' backs. He speculates about the origin of the sinister circles, while relieved that the nobility escaped further harm. Yulia expresses her deep gratitude to her master, admitting her nerves were shot during her massive barrier deployment. To his surprise, she confirms she still has plenty of magic left as she anxiously prepares to share a massive life decision. Yulia abruptly confesses that watching him work has made her realize she isn't cut out to be a palace mage. Giannino is completely stunned by her sudden declaration and demands to know what brought on this sudden change of heart. She explains her preference for direct, explosive combat magic over calculated defensive barriers and theory. Yulia visualizes a future where she can unleash high-impact offensive spells rather than being bogged down by palace duties. When she mentions joining a guild instead, Giannino completely loses his composure and desperately tries to stop her. Janino passionately urges Yulia to reconsider the palace, while she secretly relishes seeing her usually unflappable master so flustered. Yulia worries that her formidable reputation as a fearless combatant will ruin her prospects of finding a noble husband. She contemplates the heavy social burden that comes with possessing such devastating power. Janino assures her that any noble would be thrilled to marry a mage of her extraordinary caliber. Yulia mentally counters that her dream vision power is highly unique and unlikely to inherit to any future children. The conversation shifts to the uncertain nature of magical inheritance and the expectations of noble high society. Determined to avoid royal entanglements, Yulia considers running away to become an adventurer or marrying quickly to escape. She doubts if any decent noble suitor would actually accept someone with her intense magical quirks. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Janino reaches for the teapot with a sudden decisive glint in his eye. With absolute confidence, Janino boldly offers himself up as the perfect husband candidate. Yulia sits in stunned silence as her master calmly pours her a fresh cup of tea. A sudden shift in perspective builds intense anticipation as the true depth of Giannino's feelings begins to unravel. His shocking proposal echoes through the elegant room, completely shattering Yulia's expectations. Yulia is left utterly speechless, her mind racing as she stares at her master in disbelief. Yulia frantically questions if her master is actually serious about proposing to his own apprentice. Giannino smiles warmly, assuring her that he sees absolutely nothing wrong with his sudden offer. He defends his suitability, reminding her of his noble Viscount lineage despite being slightly older than her. A glimpse into Giannino's past reveals a young man who had zero interest in ordinary political matches or standard engagements. Young Giannino found high society ladies superficial, as they failed to appreciate the true elegance of his magic. In his heart, he yearned for a partner who could truly connect with him through the beauty of pure mana. That all changed the moment a young Yulia effortlessly recreated a complex spell after seeing it only once. Young Giannino was instantly captivated by her brilliant talent, realizing she was the unique partner he had always searched for. Back in the present, Yulia is a blushing, chaotic mess, completely overwhelmed by his heartfelt revelation. She tries to process her age and the societal norms surrounding high-profile noble engagements. Giannino gently points out that age gaps are common in high society arrangements, leaving Yulia even more flustered. Giannino watches her adorable, panicked reaction with a highly amused, knowing smile. He playfully teases Yulia for not immediately rejecting the idea, driving her to a fever pitch of embarrassment. Giannino reassures her that his proposal is a genuine, highly beneficial option for her future. Yulia's heart pounds furiously as she struggles to make sense of her rapidly spinning emotions. His golden eyes lock onto her, conveying a deep sincerity that she simply cannot ignore. Giannino gently tells her there is absolutely no pressure to give him an immediate answer. He promises to wait patiently for her to grow up rather than rushing her into a marriage she isn't ready for. He simply requests that she consider him as a serious candidate for her future hand in marriage. Yulia reflects on her past life, realizing how dramatically her destiny has shifted because of her connection to Giannino. Giannino smiles with genuine affection, leaving a lasting impression on his overwhelmed apprentice. Yulia prepares to deliver her response, her initial panic giving way to quiet contemplation. She takes a slow sip of her tea and promises to give his surprising proposal some serious thought. After a chaotic day of royal battles and sudden proposals, Yulia finally returns to her quiet family estate. She slips past the household staff, relieved to find that news of the palace attack has not yet reached her home. Dressed in her signature floral gown, Yulia prepares for whatever high society chaos awaits her next. She steels her resolve, determined to survive the looming societal pressures and carve out her own path no matter what. Exhausted after surviving a brutal palace siege, Yulia prepares to return to her academy dorm, telling her family's maid to send word immediately if any urgent news arrives. The concerned maid gently asks if Yulia will stay for dinner, but she politely declines the offer. Yulia bitterly notes that her presence back home would only serve to irritate her demanding brothers anyway. Accepting her young mistress's decision with a heavy heart, the loyal maid respectfully bids her farewell. With a sharp snap of her fingers, Yulia unleashes a brilliant wave of teleportation magic to escape her stressful household. Materializing on the bustling city streets, Yulia immediately senses a heavy, restless tension lingering in the air following the recent palace disaster. Arriving at the academy gates, she finds the guards on high alert, thoroughly checking everyone's identity under strict royal orders. Finally back in the absolute safety of her private room, a thoroughly drained Yulia collapses onto her bed in complete exhaustion. Lying motionless on the mattress, she feels too utterly depleted to take even a single additional step. A sudden start snaps her awake as she finally begins to regain consciousness. Sitting bolt upright in her bed, Yulia disorientedly wonders exactly how much time has passed while she slept. Startled by a sudden, persistent knocking at her door, she cautiously calls out to ask who is there. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Yulia opens the door to find out what urgent matter has brought someone to her room. The anxious dorm matron reveals that Yulia's family has been sending an endless stream of letters in a desperate bid to reach her. The matron urges her to visit the academy infirmary for a checkup, leaving Yulia confused as to why a simple nap would cause such alarm. As her stomach suddenly growls, she realizes she is also feeling an unusually intense, ravenous hunger. Pacing through the vast dining hall, she notes the academy is practically deserted due to both the long vacation and the terrifying tea party incident. Sitting down to eat, Yulia begins sorting through the massive pile of 7 urgent letters sent from her home. She notes that the remaining 3 letters are from the Imperial Palace, Lord Yolande, and Dr. Baron. While her family's letters demand her immediate return, the official palace summons requests her presence to receive their formal gratitude. Reading Lord Yolande's letter, she feels his deep concern and realizes how deeply traumatized he must have been by the monster assault. Opening Dr. Baron's letter next, Yulia finds it similarly filled with protective worry and care for her well-being. Checking the dates on the letters, Yulia's eyes widen in absolute horror as she realizes she has been asleep for 3 entire days. Finally understanding the dorm matron's sheer panic, she quickly sits down to pen her urgent replies. She rapidly writes out her responses, her hand moving across the parchment to reassure everyone of her safety. Determined to uncover what transpired during her 3-day slumber, Yulia resolves to return home the very next day. Yulia first visits the academy's medical clinic, tentatively checking if Dr. Baron is currently inside. Dr. Baron warmly welcomes her, and she explains her bizarre 3-day sleep while requesting a complete magical examination. Conducting a thorough magical scan, Dr. Baron confirms that she has sustained absolutely no injuries or mana abnormalities. He explains her long slumber was simply her body's natural way of recovering her depleted magic before asking if she was present during the palace attack. Yulia admits she overexerted herself, but Dr. Baron praises her heroic barrier spell, noting the royal knights are full of admiration for her. Pleased with her clean bill of health, Dr. Baron gently reminds her to take better care of her body in the future. With a quiet click, the clinic door closes behind Yulia as she heads back to her room. The moment she sits back down on her bed, a powerful, familiar wave of drowsiness washes over her once more. Fighting a losing battle against her heavy eyelids, Yulia quickly drifts back into a peaceful sleep. Sometime later, a carriage arrives at her family's grand estate, and she rushes inside to face her looming familial duties. A butler respectfully knocks on the massive wooden doors of her father's private study. Inside, her father stands deep in thought about noble marriage proposals before the servant officially announces Yulia's return. Turning around with a fistful of letters, her father sternly demands an immediate explanation for the sudden chaos surrounding her. Sweating nervously, Yulia realizes she is in for a thoroughly exhausting parental interrogation. Memories of her explosive battle against the terrifying beasts flash through her mind as she prepares her defense. She tries to explain that the sudden influx of letters is simply other noble houses desperately trying to secure her hand in marriage. Yulia firmly declares her absolute refusal to marry, recognizing her father is only interested in leveraging these high society proposals for family status. Cornered, she impulsively names Master Giannino as her sole potential candidate to shut down his marriage demands. Her father is completely blindsided by the name of the legendary court mage, his cigar slipping from his fingers in sheer shock. Seizing her chance to escape the awkward interrogation, Yulia quickly bids her father farewell. Leaving her father frozen in absolute disbelief, she cheerfully prepares to make her swift exit. Her father suddenly snaps out of his daze, demanding she at least change out of her casual attire before heading out. The grand family carriage clatters away from the sprawling mansion, carrying Yulia toward her next high-stakes destination. Peering out the window of the moving carriage, Yulia contemplates her rapidly shifting fate and the dangerous road that lies ahead. Just as Yulia steps out of her family carriage, a royal messenger suddenly intercepts her with an urgent message from Prince Randolph. The brown-haired messenger politely requests her presence at the exclusive first salon on behalf of the prince. As Yulia walks toward the Grand Palace, she anxiously contemplates his unexpected premature reunion with the prince. She arrives at the entrance of the prestigious first salon, a lavish room strictly reserved for high nobility. Stepping past the butler, Yulia reflects on the few times she visited this elegant hall in her past. Inside, Prince Randolph turns to greet her with immediate protective concern for her well-being. Reassuring him of her safety, Yulia joins the relieved silver-haired prince for a quiet private tea session. In a moment of absolute serenity, Yulia quietly breathes in the rich, nostalgic aroma of her tea. Holding her delicate teacup, Yulia resolves to take her time and savor the peaceful moment. The prince warmly comments on her adorable expression while contentedly watching her enjoy the colorful towers of sweets. Setting down his cup, Prince Randolph thoughtfully prepares to transition to a more serious topic. He gently inquires about her typical routine and daily academic activities at the academy. Yulia explains that she dedicates all her free time to practicing magic to make up for her rural background. Impressed by her dedication, the prince makes a stunning proposal to personally become her magic tutor. Flustered, Yulia quickly declines the offer to avoid sparking jealousy among his prospective fiancé candidates. Suddenly haunted by dark memories of his betrayal in a past timeline, Yulia's face briefly clouds with sadness. She quickly brushes off his concern, forcing a bright, nervous smile to keep her composure. Looking at him, she wonders if their altered destinies will lead him to make entirely different choices this time. Staring at her tightly gripped hands, she vows that she will never return to the palace's gilded prison. Standing tall, Yulia firmly resolves to live this second chance entirely on her own terms. She casually remarks on her chronic illness, subtly signaling her complete lack of interest in royal marriage. Undeterred, the prince slowly sips his tea, building up the courage to deliver his next words. Looking directly into her eyes, Prince Randolph formally requests to be considered a candidate for her hand. The prince clenches his fist in silent anxiety, displaying the intense sincerity behind his sudden proposal. Panicking, Yulia realizes her opportunistic father would accept this prestigious match without a single second thought. She politely rejects his offer, suggesting Lady Vera Venegict is far more suited to be his future queen. The prince is left completely dumbfounded and speechless by her swift, direct refusal. Confused, Prince Randolph questions why Lady Vera is even being mentioned in their personal conversation. When Yulia claims Vera is the leading fiancé candidate, the prince dismisses it as a rumor Vera invented herself. Yulia's eyes widen in sheer shock as the prince suddenly addresses her by her full name. Surrounded by blooming roses, Prince Randolph passionately declares his absolute desire to give his heart only to her. Yulia is completely overwhelmed as the prince pours his heart out, pleading for her affection. Dumbfounded by his intense declaration of love, Yulia remains entirely frozen and silent. Prince Randolph gently acknowledges her feelings, yet maintains that the future queen must possess the right aptitude. Bowing her head, Yulia argues that her past commoner-like lifestyle makes her completely unfit for such a massive role. Looking at his quiet demeanor, Yulia desperately tries to decipher what is truly going on inside his head. The prince sadly reflects on how they shouldn't have even met as children in this timeline. Their heavy conversation is suddenly interrupted as a royal butler announces a summons from the king himself. Yulia stands up, her elegant white high heels clicking against the red carpet as she prepares to depart. Offering a graceful, polite curtsy to the silent prince, Yulia bids him farewell and makes her exit. A royal attendant loudly announces Yulia's arrival as she enters the breathtakingly vast throne room. Yulia offers a formal greeting, but King Joseph warmly waves his hand and tells her to drop the formalities. The king expresses his immense gratitude for the powerful barrier spell she cast to protect the nobles. When the king asks what reward she desires, Yulia instantly suspects he is trying to bind her with titles. She quietly considers her options, determined not to fall into a high society political trap. To the king's surprise, she asks only for a selection of the palace head chef's famous sweets. King Joseph stares at her in absolute disbelief, questioning if she is truly satisfied with just desserts. Yulia politely apologizes, explaining that her simple countryside upbringing leaves her with zero interest in titles or jewels. Touched by her lack of greed, King Joseph rests his face in his hand with a highly amused smile. The king cheerfully grants her wish, leaving Yulia relieved to have dodged a major political bullet, for now. To kick off this thrilling recap, we start with Yulia quietly realizing that a complete lack of ambition makes her a major political headache for the royal court. While the king plots to tie her down for the empire's sake, Yulia resolutely decides she wants absolutely no part in their royal schemes. Stepping out into the grand hallway, Yulia runs straight into Prince Randolph, who is stunned to learn she only asked his father for simple desserts. Offering her a gentle smile, the silver-haired prince prepares to bring up their interrupted conversation regarding his shocking marriage proposal. Suddenly, a dramatic arrival cuts him off as the legendary court mage, Professor Giannino, sweeps in to check on Yulia's well-being. Giannino remarks on the severity of the recent monster assault, prompting the prince to defend his actions by praising Yulia's heroic barrier. The protective mage scolds the prince for summoning an exhausted girl to court, leaving Randolph entirely speechless and unable to argue. Deeply apologetic, the prince bows his head to ask for her forgiveness, while Yulia quickly tries to de-escalate the awkward tension. Defeated and filled with silent contemplation, Prince Randolph quietly accepts her polite reassurance as he watches her prepare to leave. Bypassing all high society etiquette, Giannino suddenly grabs Yulia's wrist and sweeps her away to his private laboratory. While the prince watches in disbelief, he is forced to politely apologize for overworking Yulia, knowing the legendary mage operates beyond normal court rules. Calling out behind her, the determined prince firmly declares that his love remains unchanged and promises they will meet again. As they walk down the quiet palace corridors, Yulia can't help but wonder what her enigmatic magical mentor is planning next. They finally arrive at his magnificent personal laboratory, a sanctuary filled with books, arcane artifacts, and cozy furniture. The Grand Mage completely loses his cool, shouting in utter disbelief upon learning Yulia slumbered for 3 entire days. Sitting down with him, Yulia sheepishly admits she expected a normal night's sleep but was totally shocked by her prolonged coma. Facepalming in sheer exhaustion, Giannino jokingly scolds her for being an absolute master at causing everyone massive panic. While Chibi Yulia acts innocent, Giannino explains that completely draining one's mana reservoir inevitably forces the body into a protective comatose sleep. Perplexed, Yulia's chibi self insists she only used half of her strength, leaving her to question her own incomprehensible magical limit. When Yulia asks if sleeping was just a natural recovery process, Giannino stares back in deep, concerned silence. Intrigued, the mage presents an ornate golden copper plate and requests her permission to perform a complete magical scan. The moment her elegant shoe touches the plate, a breathtaking explosion of pure magical energy erupts and floods the room. Yulia realizes the device reads mana levels through a color spectrum, where a blue light would signify a dangerously low reservoir. Staring at the blinding, high-capacity reading, Giannino wonders why a girl with such immense mana would ever crash for 3 days. Looking at her with newfound intensity, the mage demands to know why someone with such monstrous power was kept hidden in her childhood. Plunged into deep silence, Yulia weighs the risks of revealing her biggest secret to a man she has grown to trust. Stealing her resolve, Yulia looks him dead in the eye and demands a solemn vow of absolute secrecy. She reveals that she only shared this world-shattering secret with Dr. Baron after securing a binding magical contract. Realizing the staggering gravity of her words, Giannino immediately resolves to cast a high-level soundproof barrier around them. With a sweep of his hand, a majestic dome of silencing magic seals the room from any prying ears. Reaching into the arcane void, the legendary mage summons a blank scroll of binding magical contract. Flashing a mischievous smile, Giannino holds a finger to his lips and invites her to bind their trust with a magical pact. Touched by his willingness to protect her, Yulia eagerly swears to uphold her end of the sacred oath. With a steady hand, she signs her name onto the glowing parchment, sealing their destiny together. She explains the unbelievable truth. She lived a past life, went back in time, and trained her mana by fighting monsters for 3 years in a dream world. She lays bare her darkest trauma, explaining her absolute refusal to associate with Prince Randolph after his brutal betrayal and her execution in the previous timeline. Left in absolute shock, the mage struggles to comprehend a forbidden temporal magic that completely defies the established laws of the universe. Consulting his ancient texts, Giannino reveals a chilling fact. Time reversal magic can only be cast by those bearing legitimate royal blood. Horror washes over Yulia as she hears the ultimate terrifying price of reversing time, the caster's very life. With a grim expression, Giannino confirms that the sacrificial toll of the spell is written plain as day in the ancient records. Left alone with her thoughts, Yulia sits at her desk, desperately trying to solve the puzzle of her rebirth. A terrifying question consumes her mind. Who in the royal family sacrificed their life to send her back? Staring at the ancient script, she wonders if the seemingly cold King Joseph was the one who saved her. Or worse, could her executioner, Prince Randolph himself, be the savior who traded his life for her second chance? Clutching her head in pure emotional agony, she tearfully rejects the thought, unable to believe her mortal enemy would die for her. The overwhelming psychological trauma triggers a massive panic attack, causing Yulia to scream out in terror as Giannino desperately tries to calm her. Snapping out of the horrific memory, Yulia gasps for air as her worried mentor frantically calls out her name. Rubbing her tear-filled eyes, an exhausted Yulia apologizes for the dramatic scene she just caused. Deeply concerned, Giannino offers to carry her straight to Dr. Baron's clinic, but Yulia quietly insists she has recovered. Gently reaching out, Giannino commands her to stay put, leaving us to wonder if she can survive the dark truths of this timeline. Swept off her feet in a dramatic, unexpected turn of events, Yulia finds herself entirely at the mercy of her highly protective mentor. Blushing furiously, she demands to be let down, but the stubborn mage easily dismisses her protests with logic that only leaves her more exasperated. As Giannino boasts about his physical training, a passing noble stops dead in his tracks, completely shocked to see the legendary court mage carrying a lady through the corridors.
Hearts flutter and rumors instantly begin to swirl as onlookers whisper in awe, wondering who this mysterious young lady in the Grand Mage's arms could possibly be.
Ignoring all high society gossip, Giannino strides right out of the castle gates toward a waiting carriage, determined to get her to safety. Safely settled inside the carriage, the atmosphere turns quiet as the heavy reality of her health begins to sink in. Giannino jokingly laments that he couldn't simply use flight magic to carry her through the city streets, a terrifying prospect that makes Yulia internally shudder. She realizes with absolute certainty that her eccentric mentor is crazy enough to have actually attempted such a stunt. The carriage soon pulls up to a grand leafy estate housing the private clinic of the trusted physician. Giannino bursts dramatically through the clinic doors, frantically calling for the physician as the startled doctor turns around in surprise. Ushering them into the quiet ward, Dr. Palan immediately inquires about Yulia's condition with deep concern. Although the physician rushes to perform a medical scan, Yulia gently pushes back, politely insisting that her collapse was nothing serious. Explaining that her mentor is simply being overly dramatic, Yulia watches as the doctor firmly asks Janino to step out of the room for a private consultation. The stubborn mage flatly refuses to leave, determined to stay for what he knows will be a highly critical conversation regarding her condition. Conceding to his presence, Dr. Palan reveals that she suffered a severe psychological seizure and earnestly requests the details behind her sudden relapse. The physician gravely contemplates the terrifying possibility of the prince utilizing sacrificial time magic, highlighting the baffling contradiction of her executioner giving up his life to save her. Overwhelmed by the agonizing paradox of her past life, Yulia clutches her head as tears of pure confusion and grief stream down her face. Seeing her distress, her mentor reaches out to offer a comforting touch, gently reminding her that she needs rest above all else. She tries to argue through her tears, but the emotional exhaustion finally takes its toll, leaving her too weak to resist. The doctor gently eases her into a deep magical sleep to soothe her fractured mind, while Giannino watches over her in quiet, somber vigil. When she awakens feeling much calmer, Dr. Palan advises her to recuperate at a nearby inn, assuring her that a carriage is already on its way. Smiling warmly, Yulia insists she has fully recovered and is more than capable of walking to the inn by herself. Naturally, Giannino flashes a radiant smile and cheekily offers to carry her there in his arms once again. This shameless offer leaves both Yulia and the elderly doctor completely speechless at his relentless antics. Wisely choosing to avoid further carrying incidents, Yulia waits outside the charming inn for her scheduled departure. Soon, her elegant horse-drawn carriage arrives, drawing a small crowd of attendants and caretakers wishing her a safe journey. With the assistance of the palace staff, she gracefully boards the carriage, eager to escape the suffocating politics of the capital. As the carriage begins to roll away, Yulia looks back one last time, exchanging a meaningful, silent farewell with her mentor. A gentle smile graces her lips as she departs, met by a warm, reassuring gaze from the devoted mage who promises to protect her. Once she is safely out of earshot, Giannino's smile fades as he confronts Dr. Palan about using forbidden dream magic on her. Turning away with a heavy heart, the doctor solemnly confesses that despite her tender age, the girl's soul was so shattered she actively wished for death. This heartbreaking revelation strikes a deep chord in the Grand Mage, filling him with a profound, quiet sorrow for his young disciple. The doctor explains that her monstrous mana reservoir is the direct, tragic byproduct of her endlessly fighting monsters in a dream world just to escape her painful memories. When Giannino questions her abnormally long slumber, the doctor gently reveals that her mind is actively retreating into sleep as a desperate defense mechanism. It is her soul's instinctual way of protecting itself from the overwhelming trauma of her past life. Realizing her desperate desire to flee to another country, they both agree that Prince Randolph's presence is only acting as a toxic trigger to her trauma. The doctor warns that Giannino's dramatic rescue of the collapsed young lady will undoubtedly trigger an immediate report straight to the royal family. Fearing the Empire will try to forcefully bind her under the pretext of being sickly, the determined mage strides directly toward the royal chambers. Reaching the heavy golden doors of the prince's quarters, he knocks firmly before a quiet voice commands him to enter. Giannino steps inside to face Prince Randolph, who looks up from his book, highly surprised by the court mage's sudden and rare visit. With a cold, piercing gaze, Giannino delivers the shocking news of Yulia's sudden collapse, demanding the prince's full attention. Though the silver-haired prince admits he planned to visit her tomorrow, the protective mage sternly warns him to absolutely refrain from doing so. Demanding to know why, Randolph is met with the blunt reality that his unwanted attention has placed her under severe, life-threatening mental stress. When pressed about what transpired at the salon, the prince confesses his straightforward desire to be engaged to her, completely oblivious to the panic it caused. Observing his genuine confusion, Giannino internally questions if the prince truly holds zero recollection of his past life sins. Speaking with brutal honesty, the mage declares that if a simple royal summons is enough to cause her collapse, she is utterly unqualified to stand by his side. He warns that any further pursuit will paint a massive target on Yulia's back, leaving her vulnerable to the vicious political attacks of jealous rival candidates. Randolph is left completely horrified as the terrifying weight of his actions and the danger he poses to his beloved finally sinks in. Concluding his report with a final, unyielding vow to protect her at all costs, the legendary mage bows and turns to leave the prince to his heavy thoughts. Collapsing onto his office couch, an exhausted Giannino rubs his temples, knowing the battle to secure Yulia's peaceful future has only just begun. Behind every powerful mage lies a secret origin, and Giannino's bond with Dr. Palan runs far deeper than anyone in the Empire realizes. A horrific childhood accident left a young Giannino broken and bleeding on the cold streets, clinging to life by a thread. Just as hope seemed lost, Dr. Palan used his legendary healing magic to rescue the dying boy and restore him to health. Inspired by the doctor's incredible power, the young boy dedicated himself to studying under his savior's wing. His relentless training quickly bore fruit, catching the attention of the royal court's elite spellcasters. Through pure determination, Giannino climbed the ranks to secure his place as the prestigious head court mage of the kingdom. When Dr. Poulin asked him to tutor Count Osborne's daughter, Giannino reluctantly agreed out of deep respect for his mentor. The moment Giannino met his new pupil, he was completely astounded by her raw, unpolished magical capability. Not only did Yulia possess staggering talent, but her advanced education made teaching her an absolute breeze. Watching her earnest desire to learn, the stoic mage quickly began to cherish Yulia like his very own younger sister. He swore upon his legendary title to guide and nurture her talent to its absolute peak. Her bright, joyful smile became a constant source of warmth and light in his otherwise cold political world. Once the academy term began, Giannino was left to endure the tedious daily paperwork of his royal duties. The heavy burden of his work instantly vanished the moment he received a heartwarming letter from his beloved disciple. A sudden, frantic distress message flashed through his crystal ball, warning of a dangerous beast outbreak in the courtyard. Wasting no time, the head court mage rallied his elite magic squad and rushed desperately toward the danger. Arriving at the scene, Giannino stood in absolute awe as he witnessed Yulia's staggering combat prowess firsthand. Without showing a hint of fear, she effortlessly constructed complex defensive arrays to repel the monstrous threat. Staring at the massive, intricate spell circles, the legendary mage was left completely dumbfounded by what he was seeing. He internally questioned how a young noble girl could possibly possess such lethal, battlefield-ready combat skills. Realizing she would become a target for jealous factions, Giannino decided to draft a protective proposal to secure her safety. Swearing to defend whatever future she desired, he resolved to support and protect his precious student until the very end. Snapping out of his deep reverie, the exhausted mage realized he had let himself get entirely lost in his past memories. Gathering his resolve, Giannino decided he must uncover the dark truth behind the bizarre monster attack in the royal courtyard.